So, I haven't uploaded in a while, and I'm sure you're wondering why. The reason is actually pretty simple. I might look like a normal YouTube channel with just a funny, deplorable name, but in reality, I'm actually a gambler, and I've decided to gamble on something. My life. Well, that gambling attempt was a failure, but I am a man of my word. Let me give you something that took my life to make. I've already talked about some of the past zombie maps, like the beginning of Zombies, where I went into detail about the experience of playing the map, going room by room, going through everything that I wanted to talk about, and I did that for each map. I went through the map layouts, the atmospheres, perks, and other game mechanics of Zombies, to infinite damaging wonder weapons, to eventually conclude in Doris, with the increasing presence of the story and Pack-a-Punch. By 2009, near the end of WoW's lifecycle, Zombies was a lot more larger and popular than when it began. At least, up until Treyarch's next game, which, between that time period between WoW and Treyarch's next title, it would be an interesting period that had long-lasting effects on the game mode. Taking a quick step back, most of the games Treyarch made were World War II shooters for COD, and by 2008, most desire for a shooter set in that period was long gone. For COD, more people wanted the modern setting, especially since it was the genre that popularized COD with Modern Warfare 1, and because of the lack of popularity with World War II shooters, they were dropped as potential settings up until 2017 and 2021. Looking over to Infinity Ward, in 2009, a sequel to Modern Warfare 1 was planned, intended to be a step forward for the series with much better graphics, a much larger multiplayer, an action-packed campaign, and even a new third game mode for the Modern Warfare series. This sequel would be called Modern Warfare 2. Good one. While Modern Warfare 2 provided an amazing step forward for the series and helped popularize it even more, one issue of the release was the fact that Treyarch would have to cancel their 5th DLC for World at War because it would coincide with the release date of Modern Warfare 2. Instead of scrapping the entire DLC, they moved it over to the next title for 2010. 2010 would be the period where Treyarch went down an entirely different direction, where instead of just being known as that other company that made COD games, their new installment would solidify themselves as one of the best developers for COD, with the creation of a new series you might have heard about.
We are in grave danger from the communists. Our freedom, our very way of life is at risk.
We and us are not so different. We are all soldiers without an arm, betrayed, forgotten, abandoned. In Fakulta, we are all brothers.
Wake up! Wake up!
Where am I? Where's Reznov?
Listen to me. Dragovich, Kravchenko, Stein. These men must die.
Where's the broadcast station?
I don't know what you're talking about.
The numbers, Mason. What do they mean?
I don't know anything about any numbers.
Every journey begins with a single step.
This is step one!
Instead of being set in the Eastern Front or the islands of the Pacific, the setting instead takes place during the middle of the Cold War. Right from the get-go, you take the perspective of a character named Alex Mason, who's trapped in an interrogation room for reasons we don't know yet. In the room itself, you can't spot many details looking around because of how blurry it is, but some details you can spot, aside from the obvious televisions on the side, are the black silhouette of the interrogator and the numbers flashing around you. You can also get out of your chair, and right behind you is a terminal where you can place in some commands like seeing concept art, unlock all the intel, and missions for the campaign, play a whole text game called Zork, or an entire Zombies map. Now, some games have the main menu be in the actual game itself, And not to turn this into a random conversation on main menus, but honestly, I adore games that have their main menus be in the actual game itself. One comparison I can make is a game that came out this year. In Helldivers, you have this main lobby that effectively serves as your main menu. You have a place where you can learn more about the lore, a place where you can change stratagems, research further stratagems, change weapons, and select which planet you'll go to. You can also go ahead and practice your speed with stratagems and stratagem hero if you bought the DLC. But the moment you step inside the hell pod, it gets shot straight down to the planet. The game begins right there and then. The reason why I love games that do this is because it's a difficult but also an amazing choice in game design that creates immersion for the player almost immediately, while also managing to add personality to the game. The cherry on top is that it's not really necessary. Technically, yes, all these games would slightly suffer if they lost their immersive menu in favor of a basic bitch 2D menu, but the gameplay, story, maps, and the content the game has would still be there completely untouched. But because of how well presented these menus are, they feel integral to the game. You'd struggle to imagine these games without it. So, when looking over to Black Ops, it shows how Treyarch placed so much attention and care for their game that when looking at the story, they placed it at the forefront of the game because part of it is integrated to the main menu where you can access the other modes. For Treyarch, they've always tried to influence the other modes with the setting and atmosphere from the campaign, managed to create their own separate identity within those modes. So, multiplayer for example, the main menu and the ambient tracks in the multiplayer really do give these maps so much flavor and personality, even if some of them look the same color-wise or just parts of the campaign. But that's all I'll say for the multiplayer for now, because today I want to focus on a mode that's key to this video. Clicking on the third option in the main menu immediately changes everything, with the coloring going from a natural blue to a deep blood red. Footage on the television changes as well. If you look past the televisions though, you'll notice that even the interrogator looks infected too, and it's such a slight detail that if you noticed it for the time, it added to how ominous the main menu was. It created that sudden fear that the interrogator might break in to get you. It's amazing that, with the click of one button, everything presented in this main menu gets flipped on its head. The tone, the atmosphere, the idea that you went from being tortured, isolated, and trapped. But with the click of one button, you swap from that to being safe from the outside. I, for the record, absolutely adore this main menu. While future games really tried to replicate the same feel or similarly be in game, they all failed to surpass this presentation for my favorite mode in Call of Duty, Zombies. But now that we're actually talking about zombies, in terms of gameplay, zombies would receive a general step up from World at War, with better movement, much better zombie swiping mechanics, with that removal of the grabbing effect the zombies had, knifing is finally useful, and compared to World at War, it'd be a lot less glitchy. New guns were added, 6 total maps were made, and a masterpiece, named Dead Ops Arcade, was introduced. They'd improve on textures, improve the lighting by making it more colorful, and remove that gray tint that World at War had. For the changes they made a total upgrade from World at War, but also upgraded it in one key way. World at War started with one map. Black Ops actually started with 3, right at launch. Kino Der Toten, the DLC map intended for World at War. 5. What was supposed to be the first map of Black Ops 1, and Dead Ops Arcade, an absolute masterpiece. The absolute However, when the game was released, you couldn't access 2 of the 3 maps because you needed to complete the campaign or use the terminal. And because Black Ops Zombies would end up introducing the mode for most people, this meant one of the maps would end up becoming played far more than the others. The map that would be accessible for most people is Kino Der Toten, which is a particularly famous map at Zombies. There's a good chance that you'll recognize some bits of it from maybe a video you watched, and you might even have heard of it despite never playing it yourself. In my case, I've played this map extensively, and I know a lot of things about it. I have a good feel with the map. I've seen this loading screen more times than I've seen my father love me, and while I wouldn't consider myself an absolute god with the way I play, I'd be willing to bet that I have a good feel for this map, and I do have a lot to say on it. I mean, when I was preparing for this video, there was a lot I wanted to tackle, but I was confused because I wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I threw away a ton of scripts, and even with this current one, I'm still making a ton of changes. I had a lot of difficulty figuring it out. With not much in life going for me, I began by gambling, then asking 3 different questions that I wanted to try and answer. Firstly, should outside factors affect the overall perception of a map? By this I mean stuff outside the map's control, like its popularity, the state at launch, nostalgia, basically things that aren't inherent to the map. Secondly, why is Kino still alive and popular? I mean, it's easy to understand why it's popular on Black Ops 1, it's the first map you get, but what about Black Ops 3? Sure, there are cases of people who might be nostalgic about the map who'd play it, but when you realize a lot of new players who'd rarely played Black Ops 1 are just playing this map instead of the others, it leaves me to wonder and get really curious about why this map is so popular, even after years. This leaves me to ask one last question. Is Kino Der Toten, Black Ops 1, as good as it gets? Only time will tell what new questions await us in this Theater of the Damned.
Power. It's always the first priority.
Beginning the map, you start with the bare essentials. Your knife, pistol, 2 grenades, and 500 points. Now, before we mention anything else like the gameplay, the map layout, or anything like that, let's quickly talk about the first thing you'll be introduced to. The atmosphere of Kino is actually not too bad, and it feels very reminiscent of the previous maps. And while I do prefer the atmospheres in the previous maps on their own, there's some things Kino does that I actually really do enjoy. For example, the sound design of the map is actually very subtle, like the sounds of the wood creaking, the wind howling, and the background sounds of damned, and knocking in certain sections of the map. It's stuff that, while you only really notice it during the more quiet moments in gameplay, like when you're looking for the last zombie, rolling the box trying to get a new weapon, or just generally looking around, it creates a slight feeling of uneasiness. This place has been abandoned for decades, long before you even set foot here, and yet, there's something else here, but you just can't see it yet. In the spawn room, you can also look past some of the barricades where you can spot some vehicles and hints of a city nearby. Once you do go outside, you'll be able to properly spot a tower in the distance, which is based on a real tower in Berlin, which confirms the location you're in, where instead of being set in an abandoned facility, a swamp, an asylum, or a random bunker, you're now in the heart of Germany, far into the future. But what I enjoy is that, despite having a different type of setting, it retains one core feature every map had before, which was the focus on isolation. Noct was the first map to do this by having the setting be an isolated bunker, where while you could get other players up to 4, you were the only ones in the area. There was no rescue, no way to get out legitimately. You were just trapped, alone. And the other maps followed along with this and tried to add more. Ferucht splits half your team between 2 rooms for most of the early game and shows how isolated you are with the background environment. Shinonuma is set in an isolated swamp. With the sound design, it makes it feel like something's out there that you just can't see it, and it manages to perfect that isolating feeling. For Doris, it shows the outbreak in the facility, showing off bodies and remains of the place, and with the constant droning sound of the alarm in the background, it really shows how isolated you really are. And Kino follows along with all those ideas. The sound design in this map is great, the presence of pretty much anything human here is long gone, and while it still follows the same ideas from Noct, with Ferucht, it's particularly close with the background environment. As you fight through the asylum, you might occasionally look past the barricades and look out there, not the center of the map or the burning forest outside. No, in one part of the map, you can look out to spot a burning town in the distance. While it's a neat detail that doesn't have any significance on gameplay, it can communicate a direct message to the player alongside in Kino. You're alone. No one is coming to help you, and the only thing you can rely on is yourself. However, despite your vulnerability, the spawn room helps empower the player gameplay-wise, aiding you in the early rounds when you need to set yourself up. Because of the spawn room size, you have a lot of space to maneuver around, and if you're playing with more players, the spawn room gives plenty of space for each player to use. It also gives you choices for how you want your games to go. If you're playing solo, purchasing quick revive as early as possible is always recommended, since it can pick you up if you get 2 swiped or swarmed later on in the game. But if that's not enough, you also have the choice of 2 wall weapons that can help you early on, and feel a lot more safer to use than just purely using the Colt and knife for a few rounds, especially when dealing with the 2-hit system on these old maps. Although I usually skip out on these weapons, the one thing I like about them is that they both offer positives and negatives in certain situations. The M14 offers low damage, but has pretty good ammo, and can help you get together a bunch of points that you'll need much later on for the early game setup, and you don't have to rebuy ammo frequently. While the Olympia is sort of the reverse of that, where it offers a fuck ton of damage early on, but has barely any ammo, and you'll be reloading a lot. It's best against dogs early on, or clearing zombies out of the way while you're progressing towards much better weapons. Both weapons do fall off later on during the rounds, and while sometimes the best choice is to just keep the pistol you start with and buy a weapon later on, the choice is there and best for newer players and the situation you might get into. And on that note, once you accumulate enough points, you'll have 2 pathways you can choose to go down. Now, I'm going to talk about the route on the right, because the path to the left sucks ass. Moving up the stairs, you reach the Upperhall, which has a straightforward path to next door, but lacks space and has multiple zombie spawns in the area. You don't want to stay in here for too long in case you get overwhelmed, but what this area has is a possible box spawn, an inactive trap, and a view of the path ahead. There's also an SMG that shows up in both routes this early on, which are the PM63 and the MPL, both of which aren't that great. While they show up the earliest aside from the spawn room weapons, both weapons struggle even in the early rounds, and with how much of an early investment it is, both weapons are seriously not worth spending any points for. Pushing ahead, you can also spot 4 portraits on the wall, which are the characters you play as: Dr. Edward Richthofen, Takeo Misaki, Nikolai Belinsky, and Tank Dempsey. There's also a blank portrait, and here we have one of the most popular questions on the map: the identity of whoever the fuck this is. While I don't have an answer for the blank portrait, and a lot of mysteries on this map are just minor details you can sort of gloss over, I think the feeling and idea they created initially is probably the most interesting part about them, rather than the resolution or answer itself. You're left wondering why these 4 characters you play as have portraits on this wall, and what correlation do these 4 characters have with the theater and the story. Keep in mind, by this point, you only have breadcrumbs and just minor pieces of the full story, and as you look around the map, you'll probably find other minor Easter eggs or radios that feed you just enough crumbs to leave you wondering, all of which just creates a sense of mystery with the map and story, just so you can try and rationalize what you know with the pieces you have. Though, I'm gonna cut abruptly there with the story, because I'd rather save that for much later on, because believe it or not, the story is actually incredibly confusing with how it's presented, and how they basically bloat it, to say the least. But after you accumulate enough points, you push onwards into the foyer, and here you have what seems like a wide open area with just a slight bit more space and weapons to work with. The first weapon you'll notice is the Stakeout, costing 1,500 points, and it's essentially a reskin of the trench gun from World at War, with some minor differences. But truth be told, while I did love the trench gun from World at War, I'm not a big fan of the Stakeout on Kino. While yes, it's a cool gun, the big reason why I don't care for it is because of the wall weapon on the opposite side of it. The MP40 has been a wallbuy since Verrucht in World at War, and throughout its implementation, it's always been one of the best wall guns to get during the early setup. Good ammo, good mobility, and because it's essentially one of the strongest guns you could get during the early game, while it's not going to be single-handedly taking you to an insane high round like a wonder weapon, it's strong enough that it can be used throughout your early game setup while you're getting perks, opening up the map, and maybe even getting weapons if you need to replace it. On Kino, it's amazing. It's great against dogs, it's great during the early rounds, and there's almost no reason not to get it early on when it's one of the cheaper guns you can get at 1,000 points. Hell, I'd say it's so good, there's no reason to go to the other route because of how good this gun is. However, I will mention, if you did go down the other route, that route offers a 74U instead, which is a good gun on Kino, but its main drawback is the location, because of how dangerous the alleyway is, and it's a little bit more expensive than the MP40. Aside from the guns though, there's also a box location and perks for both routes, but that's kind of it. Both routes don't entirely give much space to maneuver around. Pushing past the foyer, you'll reach the dressing room, which is far tighter than any route you've been in before. The 3 things this route offers is a box location, a piece of meteorite that you can interact with, which is for the Easter egg song on the map. You do have to interact with 2 more to hear the song, with the first one being located in the spawn room, and the last one being past the alleyway, I guess adjacent to the dressing room. I won't get into detail about the Easter egg song yet, but I'll focus on the other thing here, which is the MP5K. The MP5K is a great choice to use, but its two drawbacks is that it's near the MP40 and the amount of ammo it has. The MP5K has a much faster fire rate than the MP40, so you tend to run out of ammo far more quickly. The MP5K is also in a room ahead of where the MP40 is, so to get it, you'll have to save up even more points to try and get that weapon, which by this point, unless you're good or lucky at this game, you're probably going to be drained of points buying doors and probably have a low amount of ammo. Due to this, the MP40 is a much earlier, safer option compared to the MP5K, so as a result, there's not much of a reason to pick it up. But aside from that, you do have a trap here that can be useful in certain situations, but there's not much else. Once you open the door, you'll make it to your final destination, the stage itself. It's a slightly more open space with a box location, claymores, and a good M16 that you can buy off the wall if you want to. But next to the M16 is what you're here for, the power itself. And here, the map changes completely. The door connecting to spawn is open, creating a full circle from where you travel to spawn. Not to mention, with the opening of the curtains, you've unlocked one of the best spots on the entire map to loop and train for almost any round you want. But that's not the only thing that changed. Re-entering some areas you've been in prior reveals a new enemy, something that you felt that was around here, something that was heavily, kind of shown early on to you as to what kind of enemy you're dealing with. So, how are these enemies? Well, they're called Nova Crawlers, and well, they're okay. I know, I built all of that just to say they're okay. On the surface, they have a pretty nice design that works really well with the mode, and can look pretty creepy, especially with the way they wander around and their animations. It does fit with the atmosphere of Kino, and they're not too bad to deal with. Even when you kill them, all they do is just drop gas, and it blurs your screen, and that's kinda it. When they blow up, they can do some damage to you, but even then, they're just annoying to deal with. My problem with them stems from the fact that they're in almost every game afterwards. Different variants of the same enemy exist, and all it does is turn a fairly alright, unique special enemy into an unlikable nuisance. In Black Ops 1 alone, they show up in 4 total maps. 4! Who the fuck wanted them 3 more times? On Black Ops 2, they show up as jumping jacks on Die Rise, as if you needed another reason to hate that map. On Black Ops 3, they returned for Chronicles, and in Black Ops 4, they decided it wasn't enough for one version of the enemy to show up, so they made 2 different variants on top of having the normal version. Keep in mind, by Black Ops 1, they got old! Sure, you can try and make these enemies feel different by changing the animations, abilities, giving them a nice reward for killing them, or making variants of them, but it still doesn't change what they are at the core root of it. These enemies were fine to deal with on Kino, but the more they brought it into the maps and tried to change them more, they just became more annoying. At one point, they literally just teleported around you. Thankfully, I'm glad that in modern COD, while some enemies look somewhat similar to their design, they stopped adding them to maps. And if you thought that was the good part, well no, actually that was the only good part. Now they're bringing back another special enemy that was introduced in Black Ops 3 and ruining that as well. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, so let's not get into that. Yay. Kino is a map that you have to kinda train in. While you can stay in one spot and hold a defense there or run around the entire map, the best strategies on this map involve you running around in one spot, so you can bunch up the horde and gradually bring them down as they keep coming. Some of the best spots for this are the stage and the spawn room. Hell, if you're good enough, you might even be able to do the alleyway. And really, once you get better weapons, reaching casual high rounds isn't too much of an issue. It really just becomes a test of patience and trying to speedrun the map as fast as possible. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. By this point, you should have the tools and points to focus on completing the rest of the setup, such as picking up Jug, getting to Pack-a-Punch once you have enough points, running the box to get some of the new weapons they add to the map, or opening up the rest of the map that you didn't open yet. Now, before, I said this route was ass, and part of the reason why I said it was ass is because of this specific door. Once you buy this specific door, it messes with the best training spot on the map, which if you use, it can fuck you over hard. Because what can end up happening is if you're training on the stage, the undead can spawn from that door, which can be a problem when you're facing away toward a much larger one you're trying to train, and they just end up swarming you from all sides like it's a gangbang. When I say it like that, it might sound not all too difficult to avoid, enjoyed, but far more games than you can comprehend have ended because they decided to buy this door, which directly led to their deaths. And if you're playing the Chronicles version, they even added an ominous red light on top of it. If the devs knew enough to add something like this, you know for a fact that you want to avoid this door as much as you can. Although I will say the alleyway is a fun place to train because of how cramped it is, and in a way it's neat that Kino manages to give alternative ways to train, where you can train at spawn or the stage if you want one large area that's mostly safe and easy to train in. But if you want to be able to achieve high rounds and be properly safe for the rest of the game, you'll need the proper tools to do it. Since it's a new game, aside from the ray gun, it doesn't have a single weapon from World War in the box, so everything is, for the most part, original to this game. The weapons range differently, to say the least. You have weapons you want to avoid, like the China Lake and the Law. There's also support weapons that you can get, like the crossbow and the ballistic knives, where while they're not exactly the best at killing the infected, what they do well is once they're upgraded. With the ballistic knives, you're able to pick up any down player by just shooting them with the knives. And with the crossbow, once it's upgraded, you have a sort of monkey bomb effect, where the undead will go toward it instead of following you, which is really useful, especially for high rounds or if you get cornered. You also have average to good rifles you can pick up, decent shotguns, and 2 snipers. Most of these weapons are at their best during the early rounds, even if most of them aren't the greatest. But almost all weapons from the box suffer from the same issue. Not only do they have barely any ammo, but at some point they don't deal any damage, essentially meaning that when they fall off, you can't really use them that much unless you want points. You won't rely on most of these weapons in your game once you reach the real high rounds, even after upgrading them. When these weapons eventually fail, you're left gambling your points constantly at the box, rolling through average rifles, these fucking pistols that keep crashing my games, shitty launchers, maybe you even get a ray gun while you're rolling, and while it will help, just like the other weapons, once it falls off, you can no longer rely on it, and you're left buying and trying to gamble the box, wanting that one weapon that'll always carry you throughout your game. What could be one box roll could turn into hundreds of box rolls, constantly trying to get that one gun. If there's a lesson Call of Duty Zombies teaches, luck and persistence is key to perseverance. And once you finally get it, once you finally get that one lucky roll, you soon realize you secured the keys to the safety of your run. The new wonder weapon of the map is by far the best weapon you'll ever use by this point without a shadow of a doubt. Those familiar with the Wonder Waffle in the prior maps might recognize and see a similar use. However, this new weapon is far better than the Wunderwaffe, than the fuck my balls waff in almost every way possible. The Thunder Gun does infinite damage, doesn't hurt you, and can act as a get out of jail free card whenever you get trapped or have an entire horde in your way. If you get cornered and can't get out, just turn around and shoot the Thunder Gun and you're safe. If a bunch of undead are in the way, just shoot the Thunder Gun and you're safe. If you have all the zombies on the map in a giant horde, shoot the Thunder Gun and you're safe. If your wife took the kids and has you paying child support, just shoot the Thunder Gun and you won't be sending her a dime ever again. And if you're fatherless, then, well, I'm sorry, that's the only limit the Thunder Gun has. The only issue is the lack of ammo, and the fact that it doesn't spawn power-ups, meaning that if you use it frequently, you'll run out of ammo fast, and you'll have to depend on other weapons that you have, which can be a problem depending on what round you're on. That's why I recommend being very sparing with the ammo you have, and whenever dog rounds happen, be sure to grab the max ammo you get, because that single max ammo might be the only reason you can even continue into the next round. But there are 2 things you can do to help the ammo issue on the Thunder Gun slightly. One of which is to just use traps, specifically the electric ones. But whatever you do not use these turret traps, because whoever added these to the map had the devious fucking idea of having friendly fire, so you can get gunned down by your own trap and die. Plus, it sucks and has no damage. Your second option is actually a little bit more clever. If you run out of ammo and you have no way of getting more, Pack-a-Punch the Thunder Gun, because both the non-upgraded and the upgraded version deal infinite damage. When you do upgrade it, you're basically increasing the amount of ammo you have to overly simplify it. Pack-a-Punch itself is easy to get on this map as well. Once you turn on power, you just have to link the teleporter back to spawn and do it every time you use the teleporter. It's free, has no timer, and it's essentially just a more simplified version of Doris's Pack-a-Punch step. It's also much safer because once you teleport, you just go to an area that none of the infected can reach. So you can just sit back and relax for like 30 seconds or so, and if you're playing Black Ops 3, you just fucking die because they somehow fucked up where the zombies go. Alternatively, once the time is finished, you can teleport to a select few locations, like in areas similar to 5. There's also 2 versions of a children's room and a version of Verrucht before the outbreak. But aside from that, that's really all the stuff I can talk about for the base Black Ops 1 version of Kino. There's other stuff that I'm missing, and I haven't talked about other minor details like the Easter egg song, that's an absolute classic, and other things that I recommend looking for when you play the map. Now, for Black Ops 3, Kino is a slightly different story. 2 years after Black Ops 3 launched, they released Zombies Chronicles, which is basically a remaster of most of the Black Ops 1 maps. Kino was one of the maps that got remade, and they did a lot of changes that I actually kind of like. What was once a mix of gray, brown, and dirty colors is legitimately one of the most prettiest maps in all of Zombies, and the attention to detail is absolutely astounding when you realize that this is part of a DLC pack with other maps that look just as good, if not better. In the base Black Ops 1 version, the alleyway is sort of dull to look at and doesn't have many things to look at or enjoy. For being the outside part of the map, it's kinda just empty, and obviously it isn't going to look the greatest since it's an old map. It has its own atmosphere, its own tone, and for the record, people can enjoy that. But I do kind of like what they did for Black Ops 3, where they added a brand new vehicle that fit the time frame. They changed the buildings up here to be more like an apartment. They added a crashed dead body of a zombie on top of the vehicle, and it looks so pretty and alive, especially when you go through that right part of Kino. It's almost like you're actually going outside and touching grass. It's really cool, but I will say, if there's one thing I noticed a while ago, in certain spots on Kino, there's parts of the map where you can see a white light coming from it. This is actually the outside parts of the map, and you can look right through it if you look really closely. This is on all versions of Kino on Black Ops 3. What most likely happened is that the devs tried to add a damaged look to the walls, but forgot to add something behind it, meaning that you can occasionally find walls leading to the outside parts of the map. You can't go through it, but it's just something neat, and once you spot it, you can't unsee it. There's other details and quality of life improvements in other parts of the map that I haven't even begun to get into. I recommend playing Black Ops 3 and trying it out for yourself, if you haven't already. And when you can, look around and just really get into the atmosphere of the map. It's so easy to get immersed and enjoy what Treyarch added for each of the Chronicles maps, especially when you take a break from the action and just look around. Even gameplay wise, it's a tad different, with Gobblegum's ammo is next to never an issue, and most of the weapons can deal loads of damage before they fall off. The Thunder Gun in Black Ops 3 is different too, because it actually drops power-ups, and because alternative ammo types exist for Pack-a-Punch, it's basically an overall much easier version of Kino, and if you want to sit down and enjoy it, you clearly can. And while I'm not a big fan that they grabbed some Black Ops 1 weapons that were actually really well designed and look cool, they butchered them by adding bum-fucking attachments instead of just allowing you to just change the attachments for some reason. Taking a step back for a moment, Kino is an extremely iconic map. Iconic enough to be recognized even for people who have never played it. And when it comes to why this map is still so popular to this day, I think the iconicism is something that definitely affects it. And I think another reason why Kino manages to outlive some of the other maps comes down to a multitude of answers as well. One of which is that it's one of the best introductions to classic zombie maps. If you're new to zombies and want a map that can help you get used to how classic zombies maps play, while not being too primitive or advanced, Kino is probably your best bet. Sure, you have much easier maps like Ascension, but if you want a map that has enough challenge to help you get prepared for some of the more difficult maps, while being easy enough to have a breeze playing it, Kino is sort of a good map for it. Learning to train the map and learning how to manage your ammo with your wonder weapon can be beneficial for learning high rounds on other Black Ops 1 maps, especially figuring out how to be patient and learn how to play the game, even if it's a tad frustrating at times. Besides that, if we look at first maps in Zombies, they're probably some of the more important maps for a Zombies mode early on. It can define the way the rest of the mode goes, because if you have a shit start, it's going to take a lot of effort to try and recover from that. Delving into this topic, if we look at Noct for example, it was a pretty good introduction to zombies. Despite being hidden away in bare bones, it showcased the atmosphere zombies would try and go for, and a rough structure of gameplay that would be expanded upon in the future maps, since World at War can be defined as the establishment of zombies, the establishment of what worked and what to look for. But Noct as a map hasn't aged all too well, it can be criticized pretty heavily lately, especially with the amount of times it's been reintroduced. On the other side of the spectrum, while I am skipping a little bit farther ahead, another first map was Shadows of Evil for Black Ops 3, and while it was well designed, it had a ton of love and attention put into it, it was a rough first map when it first launched. It was supposed to serve as an introduction to Black Ops 3 with the mechanics, weapons, and everything important about the gameplay. And for the people who have played these maps extensively, you can probably see all the main Black Ops 3 maps to be kind of easy, not too hard to play, and especially since everything has been figured out for you with guides and videos that can help you learn to play the map, like finding parts and strategies. But when the map is fresh out of the oven and you're playing it for the first time, it can be really rough. Most people weren't used to the mechanics and gameplay of Black Ops 3, to the point that most people just preferred to play the Giant, which carried the simplistic gameplay that most people were very familiar with. It still wasn't the best option you have because you still had to buy it as part of the season pass, and as you can imagine, the launch of Black Ops 3 Zombies was kind of rough. But it would have been worse if there was no possible alternative that gave people time and a proper space to realize how the game worked. But with all that being said, now that we're long past the release of Black Ops 3, Shadows has aged amazingly, and it's one of the best maps that you can play from what Black Ops 3 has to offer. From the setting, to the themes, the wonder weapons, and even bits of the lore, I love it, especially when it gives homage to earlier maps. I suppose with both of these examples, the first best map is a map that can balance the gameplay from the last game with the new one while not becoming a byproduct of its time. While there's some maps that somewhat fit that, like the map I'd mentioned, the Giant, and other maps I haven't talked about yet, Kino is a good starter map, all things considered. It had the atmosphere, and for people who had played the earlier maps back in World at War, it was a pretty good introduction of the brand new movement, the new guns, and what Black Ops Zombies offered, while having a World at War style map that played not too dissimilar for them. While Kino hasn't aged the best and suffers from an issue that isn't inherent in the map design, which is just how overplayed it is, Kino on its own is still playable and fun every now and then. Certainly not the best, but a good map nonetheless. I'm sure I could get into other reasons why it's replayed, such as the Easter egg song 115 or the atmosphere of the map, but if there's one reason I have to talk about for Kino's replayability, I have to address the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the deadly sin of zombies. Public matches in Zombies are pretty rough, but at their best, they're fucking amazing, and you have the chance to meet brand new friends and people you wouldn't have the opportunity to meet otherwise. Each public match you play has sort of its own story. It can be the tale of friendship and surviving to the end. It can be a rare, boring lobby where everyone's decent and helps each other out, but the prevalent one most people know about is a trip through hell, with an experience that can be best explained through 7 deadly sins. To start off with, you have the greedy players who refuse to buy the first door. They'll literally just stay in the spawn room for as long as possible, building up 5,000 or 9,000 points, just staying in the spawn room, basically causing you to play a spawn room challenge, because no one wants to be a good person and help push toward opening power, jug. But if you're lucky and someone decides to buy the first door, you might be able to have the box spawn right near you on your side. And then you have the second deadly sin, gluttony, where you'll have the players who built up a ton of points just to spend it all on the box, never giving a chance for anyone else to spend a single point on it. This coincides with lust, because these same players are so fucking determined, so obsessed with getting the thunder gun, that they'll prevent other players from rolling the box, either from buying it that much or tossing grenades if they're a total asshole. And when they do eventually get it just by spamming the box, you then have the prideful players who, when they get the thunder gun or a ray gun, they'll show it off to the entire lobby and use it entirely for themselves, not caring about the rest of the team at all. You then naturally have envy. As the rest of the players see that this sinner has the best gun of the game, they'll get extremely jealous of this player, to the point that, segueing into the next sin, wrath, that player might just leave the match. And if you're unlucky enough, if that player was the host and you're playing on the original Black Ops, where it's reliant on the host to run the server, the entire match will end just like that. You also have sloth. Some people will have their game running in on the background, just staying there AFK. They won't move a muscle, and they'll just stand there in the same place as the rest of the team revives them constantly, and being a burden on pretty much everyone. And if you think that's it, believe me, I haven't even begun talking about the rest. You have the people who have their mic on, and you can hear a divorce in progress in the background. You also have the 8-year-old squeakers who just started playing zombies and will start crying when they go down. You also have the player who lives in an entirely different continent, who'll have 1 bar or 1,000 ping, and the game will act like he's playing Blind Doom while his teammates run in place every 30 seconds. You'll also have the mute player who will jump and knife as his only means of communication. They'll also be either really good at zombies, carrying the entire team practically on their back, or being so fucking shit at the game, they'll be the players leaving the match after they get more than 8 downs out of pure embarrassment. That's if they're brave enough. I've seen people leave after 2 downs, hell even 1. You also have the player who has no clue how the perks work and will pick up Mule Kick, Deadshot, and Speed Cola as his first 3 perks and never pick up Juggernog despite camping there for most of the game. But there's a ton of public match players. Kino was the hotbed, even nowadays in Black Ops 3, because the Kino is so simplistic, open, but not too piss easy that you could play it blindly, and it doesn't have anything that'll require teamwork. It inadvertently causes public matches to have some of the worst players to deal with, and in a sick way, I fucking love it, because even if I've overplayed Kino, public matches will always be a new experience, and you never know if it'll be a trip through hell or just purgatory. It's a randomness that would suck on literally any other game, but works on just this map and transit. Aside from playing with friends or the rare match I'll have nowadays to play this map, public matches are just perfect in the worst way imaginable, and I love it! With that in mind, I think it's one reason why, to this day, Kino is still played and popular with most people. Not only was it the first map you could play in Black Ops, but it was also a simplistic map that drew heavily on the previous maps. It improved on earlier Wonder Weapon mechanics by giving you a get out of jail free card, and it's an all-time classic map that just about anyone can recognize. And it's not bad at all either. If you enjoy classic Zombies gameplay from this era, this map is pretty good despite the various critiques and issues I brought up. It has a lot of replayability, a brand new Wonder Weapon, and new guns from Black Ops. The layout is fast, easy to learn, and has a great atmosphere. And besides, if it gets too old, you can just play public matches for random chaotic fun. However, outside of it, Kino is a controversial map in a very strange area. While it benefited the Zombies community in numerous ways, helping popularize it and being the reliable map you can go to if you don't have the money or don't enjoy the other maps. There was a period in Zombies when no matter what Treyarch released, whether it be a breathtaking map visually, a map with a fantastic story, or a map with amazing gameplay, articles in various channels would always repeat the same opinion over and over, that Kino was the best map in all of Zombies, and that was as good as it got. Given how much this map is discussed and tossed around, if you're around the community, even at the surface level, you've undoubtedly seen this map more times than you can count. The sheer exposure and the high pedestal this map was placed on partially helped fuel the most prominent criticism people give this map, that it's overplayed. That's the issue of having to consider outside factors. If you don't focus on it, the map is pretty good. If you do, it's either the best map ever, or a map you don't want to see again because of how many times you played it. So because of that, should you consider outside factors for maps? I think it depends. For some maps, you don't need to consider those outside factors. Take Fruct, for example. Most people look at the map itself, and if they consider outside factors, it's usually just their playing experience, which isn't all that significant. But in some cases, you need to. While it's ahead, Zetsubo is a map where you need to bring up its horrendous state when it launched, because if you don't, you won't correctly understand the sheer dislike the map received because of its buggy state. Kino fits into the latter, because of how overplayed it is and how prevalent the love has been for this map compared to all the others. And besides, Kino has always embodied nostalgia throughout the highs and lows and every change this mode has seen. If you remove nostalgia from the equation, a vital portion of Kino's identity is removed altogether. It's given a lot of people in the community memories, especially during their time playing it. Hell, during the creation of this video, I had a lot of memories of all the different games I played on this map, like when I survived an entire round with the crossbow and ballistic knives in the spawn room, or when I had a horrendous game where I straight up just got 2 G11s in one roll. It's also the best weapon I got in that entire game. I also remember numerous public match games, like seeing someone camp at Jug and never picking it up, or even when I was younger, I had to buy the door because no one else would. There are also plenty of times when I struggle because I'm pretty dogshit. Not every game on this map will tell a story, but the ones that do stick with you. That's why most people who remember this map have memories that paint a picture of their perception of the map. While Kino offered a lot on its own, compared to previous and future maps, most of its features, gameplay, graphics, stories, and so on were surpassed relatively quickly. And for the outpouring of love this map received, unfortunately this map couldn't back it up on its own. People essentially placed this map on such a high pedestal that when people asked why it was loved so much, the map slowly started to fall apart. This created a consequence. Most critiques were tossed towards the map, and sometimes they stuck pretty well, and sometimes they didn't. For example, I'm not a big fan of the overplayed critique I mentioned earlier. While I do understand some people have just played this map too much, I feel like plenty of other maps are overplayed and still widely liked. Doris, Origins, Mob of the Dead, and Der Eisendrache have been continuously overplayed by the community. Maybe not as much as Kino at its peak, but they have all been exhaustively played by thousands of people for years. I could go on and on about maps that the community has frequently played and either had or still retains cult popularity. But Kino is frequently lampooned for how much it's played, yet others aren't, at least on the same scale. Another critique I've seen people bring up is the lack of innovation, and how many innovations Kino introduces were initially supposed to be in 5 instead. As some people are aware, the Thunder Gun wasn't even intended for Kino. There's a good likelihood that it's the same with the fire sail and Nova Crawlers. It's a fair point and provides a different perspective on the map, but if used in a much more extensive critique in the map, I think it's fair. But I don't think it stands much on its own. Not only are there cases where a map barely innovates and it's still well liked, such as Town in Black Ops 2 or The Giant, but it also greatly misunderstands how Kino was designed initially. When we look at final maps for zombie modes, the most common trait most of them have is that they take influence from the previous maps in the game or series and combine them into the final map. While Doris took some influence from the previous maps, remember, Kino was supposed to be the original final map of World at War. It's not trying to be the next big step of the zombie experience like Doris was, but it's more so an amalgamation of the previous maps you've played. Kino's primary role was finalizing what World at War was trying to build up to, where you have a final map that was supposed to encompass everything in one. It ended up being used differently, since Kino launched in Black Ops, but I think that initial design philosophy stuck with it, even after its launch. It was basically the wrong map that fit perfectly in the best time and place. For that reason, the lack of innovation critique sort of falls flat on its own. There are plenty of other critiques I could also mention, but I feel like I'd be dancing around the greater point I want to make. My all-encompassing point, which embodies the critiques and issues people have with this map, is that Kino was overloved for what it was, both by the people who overplayed it and by the people who placed it on a high pedestal. While the map has a lot of good in it, given its simplicity and bare bones nature, it's entirely undeserved to say that this is the best of Treyarch's work. Maybe for the time it was the case, but nowadays absolutely not. Treyarch has long pushed the boundaries for what they want to do for zombies and continuously implemented changes to try and evolve zombies past this point. They've made maps with stories much more grander or personal. They've made maps that are much more stunning or atmospheric than this one. They've done better. But the reason this map is so overloved comes down to the same reason people have fond memories of it, the same reason Kino is still alive to this day, the same reason looking at outside factors is so important. It's the same reason Kino is so beloved that some people would say it's as good as it gets or overplayed. Nostalgia is one of the most diverse feelings out there. People have a natural fondness for the past. We all have bright memories we admire and cherish, especially when we're going through troubled times or are long past our good years. We reflect on the past as a reminder of light in our lives, whether it be innocence, not knowing when the good times eventually ran out, or because we lost something from the past. One example I can give within the context of Call of Duty is Black Ops 3. During that period, Black Ops 3 caused the community to grow massively, and it was one of the most prominent moments in the community because people kept looking at the Easter egg hunts, waiting for each map to release, or hypothesizing how the story would go. It was a bright time for the community, and loads of creators and people look back on it with sheer and utter fondness. I'm sure even nowadays people have a slight desire to return to what was seen as the simple good times. That type of nostalgia thrives when we remember the past during our dark moments, but it can cause bitterness towards the present and potentially the future. We see it nowadays for each game. Some people just want more of a formula from the past. Some people don't care for the mode's growth or necessary changes and just want to return to Black Ops 1, 2, or 3. And it's for a reason. Despite how bitter some people might get from nostalgia, it's also sweet. We remember the bits of memories that made us happy and fond in the first place. We take comfort in nostalgia because there's nothing like it. It's something your present and future will never come close to, because it's a real thing that happened. It's a story that's been told. Now, I use some of the games as an example, but Kino is the perfect example of everything I've said. For people who are much more casual and solely enjoy this map over the others, it can cause a sense of bitterness because the mode has long since changed from the early days of Kino, and the chance of a return to this style of gameplay is slim to none. Yet people will praise and desire a simplistic map like this because of how this map also creates a very sweet feeling for many. It was the map that created memories and drew a majority of people into the community. It's remembered for a good reason. However, despite all of that, nostalgia can be deceiving. While memories will live on for as long as possible, sometimes the map or game that helped you gain those memories will sometimes not age the best. Sometimes the memory will outlive it. As we push into the future, Kino isn't as good as it gets. It's actually not as good as it was. It's a map that has gradually aged terribly and doesn't hold up as well as it used to. Kino will eventually be left behind as sort of a relic of the past, as the representative of the start of the popularity of zombies and Black Ops. But more than that, a representative of people's memories of the good times people had playing zombies. And even if other maps are far better than Kino, the one thing that'll never be surpassed about this map are those memories that people have associated with the map. Nostalgia isn't necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it can be a force of good and be a source of comfort and positivity. And sometimes that feeling can be stretched out and be abused. It really depends on how you handle it. That said, it's kind of sad that said nostalgia ended up hurting this map, and on top of that, this map never got what it deserved or ever fulfilled its role because of its greatest strength. But I suppose in a way, it's also kind of poetic. Instead of being the finale for a game, it instead became the beginning of a new era of zombies and Black Ops. Now, I'm not going to turn around and give a cliche speech about how good it was that the map made zombies popular, as many people would probably do, because even that didn't help the map. As we approach the end, the only thing I want is for you to come out of this video and have a different view on a map you probably know and play, and just try to appreciate it for that, not for the memories or the numerous times you've played it, not for the many times you've seen it, and not for nostalgia. Try to enjoy it as a brand new experience if you can. That to me would be giving this map a far better treatment than saying it's as good as it gets or it's overplayed. I think I just want to see this map placed on the right pedestal, not that high that it's as good as it gets, and not too low because it's overplayed. I think I want to see this map be given the fair treatment. The reason why I'm saying this is because, believe it or not, while this video was initially being developed, I was kind of the same. I was one of those types of people. I thought this map had nothing special about it for years. While yeah, I felt there was something important for me to tackle in this video initially, I thought it was just a simplistic map. I didn't care or appreciate much of the atmosphere or what the map was trying to accomplish. I just thought it was vanilla, nothing more. A map that I've played numerous times in my life and nothing new to experience. But as I scrapped too many scripts to count and redid this video from scratch 3 or 4 times, I think I gradually grew a deeper appreciation for this map. Kino is legitimately one of the most unique zombie maps out there, especially because of its treatment and how it's the only map in Zombies, to my knowledge, that was intended to be made for an entirely different game and never released on it. That, alongside a certain tier list a YouTuber did a few years ago, very much inspired this video. It led to me asking the 3 questions, which helps motivate me to look at this map independently and give it a fresh chance to do its best, which resulted in this video. Sometimes we forget what makes something we like good. It's not something we should constantly try to remember at every point in our lives, but it's good to get a reminder of why you like something or try to re-experience it fresh again. Rarely will you come out with the same exact perspective. Change is inevitable, and memories can't really adapt to it. What we might consider good nowadays could have been considered terrible years ago. Maybe it's the complete reversal. Perspectives change, and people change. But stories already told and well known will only really change if we forget details. Try to prioritize your memory fairly. Make sure nostalgia isn't clouding your judgment, and that you actually know what you're talking about. Because, who knows, you might forget, and end up hurting what you enjoy by saying it's as good as it gets. Good night.